to everybody. We are back again with an examination of the weird and the wonderful with me, Strange Bones. And I hope everybody is having a truly fantastic day so far. Hey there to Luanle and to Crystal, welcome, welcome. So, what are we doing today? Well, as you know, if you've been following me along for a little bit, we have been examining the ghosts and cryptids around the world, and we have been having a look at things in order to decide what might be out there. And our methodology, such as it is, has been to see if we can find commonalities regardless of place, country, or culture. And we've done a few countries around the world, which has been rather interesting, but we need to take a break from our trip around the world because we need to establish a couple of things, possibly to give ourselves some kind of basis for working on. Now, as we've gone along with this, we have come to the understanding, such as it might be, that there are a number of categories for things. So, for example, if we're talking a ghost specifically, we are referring to the spirit that has remained behind of a person or thing that has passed on and therefore is deceased. This is at odds, of course, with the other variety of strange things that might be out there, such as cryptids, which are living in some manner or form, or at least are said to be, or what we would refer to as celestial spirits, things such as angels or demons, which don't really fit to the mortal plane, such as it might be. Now, given this as a beginning point, as it were, and yes, we have found a number of commonalities in what we have found, which is pretty great. We need to stop and take a look at how does one go about finding out about these different things? Should we go about finding out about these different things? And what might it all mean? So we're going to start, of course, with ghosts, which I think have the most examination, such as it is, around the world. And of course, I refer to ghost hunting. But how old is ghost hunting? Is it something that has always been a thing? Cheers. We know from what we've seen that the majority of religions and such will tell you that things like ghosts and indeed demons, angels, cryptids, and such might exist, but they never tell you much about them, and they basically follow the idea that if such things exist, leave it alone, you should have nothing to do with them whatsoever. But they don't tell you much more than that. Hey Pingu, welcome, welcome. That being said, what is ghost hunting? Well, ghost hunting is the process of investigating locations that supposedly are haunted in some manner or form. And of course, right there we have our first serious argument in that a great many people will tell you that it is absolutely a load of rubbish. There's no scientific process involved whatsoever, etc., etc. Though, of course, there are a lot of people who will tell you otherwise and say, not at all. It's absolutely legit. Hey there, Merit Zuckerman. Yes, Marit Zuckerman, welcome, welcome. I will invite people to join in live if you wish to. You don't have to, but absolutely um, do like, share, and all of the good stuff that goes along with these things so that we can get more people onto the channel. And as we do so, do give me your comments and opinions. All opinions are wonderful, though remember to be polite. We don't like to offer insult or anything like that. We appreciate the vital importance of religion as any kind and respect if other people have a difference of opinion. But that said, as we move on, typically a so-called ghost hunting team will attempt to collect evidence, and of course that's important because how? They will use in the modern day things such as EMF meters, apparently they speak better than I do, digital thermometers, handheld and static, video cameras, thermographic and night vision cameras and goggles, and audio recorders. However, that's not always been the case. That's very much a modern thing. And in the past, there have been a number of other methods which included things such as dowsing and Ouija boards among the items used to at least attempt to find out if places were haunted. Now, I can say that if we look at the history, paranormal research as such is something that dates back to the 19th century. And one of the greatest fellows that really started this up was the famous Harry Price, who definitely went around doing a whole lot of stuff. But even before Harry Price, you had people such as Hereward Carrington with his Ululameter, a ghost detector machine that he invented in 1922, which is quite a while back. And of course, since then, it has gained traction in popular viewing and lost traction and more, dependent on. Hey there to Savinois and Bongi M. Good to see you guys here. So, people have been interested very much in the more modern ages, but it is also true to say that it's gone back a lot further. And while present day ghost hunting really started with the spiritualist area in the early 19th century, which started up things like London's Ghost Club and such, it has been something of interest for many centuries before. Now, of course, it's not something that is without dangers, and possibly indicating that it's not the ghosts we need to worry about. Most of the injuries and deaths that have occurred in ghost hunting seems to be where homeowners whose properties were invaded fired on those trying to do investigations, and people who have fallen from buildings, etc. So it's not so much the ghosts that seem to have caused the death in modern ghost hunting, but nevertheless, it is an interesting view of things. Now, Harry Price himself, who was one of the first serious parapsychologists, was a Brit, born in 1881 and lived until 1948. He was a psychic researcher and author who gained quite a lot of public prominence for his investigations into psychic phenomena, and he did a lot of exposing of fraudulent spiritual mediums. He did investigate in quite public ways a number of important British haunted places, such as the Borley Rectory. We haven't gone to Britain yet, so we will come to the Borley Rectory in due course, of course. But he was a long-standing member of the Ghost Club in London. He was part of the Society for Psychical Research, and he used his knowledge of stage magic to debunk fraudulent mediums. And he traveled around the world a bit as well. He went to Germany and other places. So absolutely, he did do quite a bit of work to try to find if things were real or not. Now, one of the big things that came out in the spiritualist era was ectoplasm, which apparently mediums were able to produce when communing with the dead. And he managed to prove that, for the most part, it was fake, created stuff, etc. So he definitely was against anything fake, which perhaps contributed to the idea of him having, at least to a certain degree, a scientific method in what he did. Hey there, Artem, welcome. Absolutely, we can say that he tried his best, and it may or may not be of interest to know that the famous stage magician Harry Houdini was also somebody that did a lot of that. But we will get to that a little bit later. So he then formed the National Laboratory of Psychical Research, and even made a formal offer to the University of London to equip and endow a department of research at the university. And interestingly enough, they responded positively. You wouldn't think so, but they nevertheless did. He did a lot of exposing, though, of famous mediums, which didn't always make him friends, but he did invent and use a apparatus called a voice control recorder, which proved quite a lot of those mediums as being fraudulent, which is interesting. But nevertheless, he spent his life looking for proof, and trying to find more. And he even did tests into other psychic abilities and so forth. It doesn't tell you too much about any that he found and thought real, but certainly it did show a lot of those that were debunked. Now, there have been another few interesting famous ones in America. Of course, you had Edward Warren Meany and Lorraine Rita Warren, who, of course, were for a long time the owners of the famous doll that's being taken around America at the moment, that is connected to the famous movies around that, and they were also involved in the famous Amityville horror case, which of course has brought on more movies and such. And as if you're into your horror, of course, those are absolutely ones you will have seen. So they were absolutely involved in a lot of these different things, and they did say, for example, that the doll from The Conjuring should never be moved or messed with. But, well, they have a lot of hardcore followers and a lot of people who think they were absolute crap. But Which is which? It's hard to say. Now, as we go along and we look at all that was said, we can say that um, critics of ghost hunting will say that the methodology, particularly the use of instrumentation, uh, has no scientific basis, and there is no proven link between the existence of ghosts and cold spots or electromagnetic fields, which is one of the questions that we have, because quite a few people that have joined us on our lives have said in their experiences that they experienced cold spots in places where they had some form of ghost encounter. So it does seem the idea of cold being connected to ghosts is common. However, we do not know why this might be the case, and I think it's something that does need to be examined further. Again, the idea of electromagnetic fields being affected, we do need to ask why this might be the case, and is it really something that is real? Um, Ghost hunters often will tell you that EMF meters show whether or not there are things around, um, and are used in most popular ghost hunting groups, to at least the ones on YouTube and as such. But is there any link at all? We are not so sure. Now, microphones, of course, are also used, and with modern technology that can eliminate background noise and such like, they're often used to try and find out if there are any sounds or voices that can be attributed to supernatural activity. Hey there, Lady Red Dragon, welcome, welcome. Um, is this the case? Hard to say. Another thing which are often ascribed to haunted place, which apparently show up in photographs, are orbs, which detractors say that dust, moisture in the air, and so forth absolutely can cause what appears to be orbs on photographs, and there's a certain amount of truth to that as well. But while we have all of these things, we don't necessarily have any specific proof that it's not true. We can say that recorders may possibly pick up radio signals or noise from the recorder. Yes, that is true. EMF detectors can pick up faulty wiring, microwave towers, and so on and so forth. This is true. But it doesn't necessarily discount them either. So the argument can go both ways, uh, despite that. But um, one interesting one from a rather famous ghost hunter says that you should never only search in dark places, because too often shadows and things can occur that really have nothing to do with anything paranormal. In fact, this particular guy makes the point of only searching in lighted places for his ghost, which I think is very, very interesting. Hey there, next year, Didi. Um, I think it is a fair thing to say that the idea that ghosts should only haunt at night is a bit odd. I mean, surely if something is haunted, it will haunt all the time. And indeed, there are occasions where ghosts are seen in very well lit places and even during the day. So perhaps. Um, but yes, it is very polarized as to whether or not there are things or are not things um, out there. And we can say that it's arguable both ways, but there is insufficient proof on either side. But what sort of tools are used and what do they really do? Um, so, looking at the kind of tools, um, the first and most famous one, of course, is an EMF reader. Now, EMF stands for electromagnetic frequency, and ultimately, what that means is it picks up whether there are any kind of magnetic field or electric field. Now, we know, especially in the modern world, that both forms of field literally are everywhere. There is no lack. So, hey there, good so. Um, that would prove problematic, I think, in many ways, unless you can prove that you've gone through and checked first when there was no haunting, and then proved afterwards that it was a sudden and new field that was being picked up. That would be different. Um, Also, I would wonder why people say that a ghost will affect an electromagnetic field. That too doesn't offer too much answer either. Now, an interesting one, of course, is they use cameras and video recorders and such, and some people say that paranormal things don't show up on film. Others say they do. It's hard to tell. There have been a number of famous photographs of ghosts, which, look, if you turn your head sideways and squint, maybe they are and maybe they aren't. Hey, Zara, it's hard to say. So, how effective these things are is questionable. Um, these days, people often use laptops and such to record data, audio, video, and so on, which can then be checked electronically and such. So, absolutely. In keeping with the idea that ghosts create cold spots, there are the use of thermographic cameras, thermal imaging, thermometers of varying varieties, and such like, which are dubious in how good they are because they measure surface temperature rather than ambient temperature. So it's a little bit difficult to tell whether or not that would actually prove a ghost is present. You also have your audio recording to capture unexplained noises and electronic voice phenomena, which are the famous EVPs, which may be disembodied voices. But again, it seems to be very difficult to actually capture any sounds like this, and one can argue that they too are a little bit um, dubious in their presence. Another one which is used but quite a lot less, most interestingly, um, is a compass. Apparently, compasses will stop working or work differently when such things occur. And I'm going to do a quick break in what we're going through now to tell you a story. Hey, Clinton, which may or may not mean something. I was working in a bookshop at the time, and a lady came in with a book that she was attempting to sell about her experience with an alien. She apparently married the alien, no less, and he visited her often, and he would always land his ship at a certain place. Now, at the time, I used to do a lot of hiking and stuff, and I was very, very familiar with the Drakensberg Mountains. And from the book, I figured out where she was talking about. And it was a bit of a hard one to get to. It was definitely a rough hike. But I knew where it was, so I figured, you know what? I'm going to go and check it out and see what's what. And I used a compass and I worked out where the place was, and I hiked up there, and my compass worked absolutely perfectly all the way up. And I found the spot, and at the spot was a large ring of stones. And if you know anything about the Drakensberg Mountains, you will know that it is very damp up there, and there's over just about everything a layer of very low ground cover and moss. But inside this ring there was nothing, but only inside the ring. And as I went up to it, my compass worked absolutely perfectly, no problems at all. But the moment I stepped over the line of stones, it spun wildly, but literally instantly on that line, not a gradual changing of how the compass turned or anything, as you would expect if there was something ferrous that you were approaching. So maybe there is truth to the idea of the compass, something to consider. I don't know about that, but something to keep in mind, perhaps. I never did figure out whether or not she was telling the truth and if she really had met an alien, but there you go. Another rather odd one that is used sometimes are Geiger counters, which is very much a la Ghostbusters, the movie, as apparently ghosts affect radiation. I don't know. I really have never heard of that being the case. I think a radioactive ghost would certainly be something quite terrifying, if nothing else, but it is what it is it not? Now, the idea of infrared or ultrasonic motion sensors does make a lot more sense, particularly the infrared, and that's insofar that if there is any movement in an area, particularly humans trying to fake something, that would set it off and you would know somebody was pulling a fraud on you. So if you could see something moving around without setting off the motion sensors, perhaps that would count as a good proof. And with infrared, of course, you can use such things as night vision and such, which rely on heat, which would help you see movement, at least from surface changes, and possibly cold spots once they'd been there for a bit. So maybe. Certainly, it's an idea. Some go so far as devices that can check the levels of gases, which are thought to contribute to reports of paranormal activity, such as carbon monoxide, which can cause you to hallucinate. So that would seem fair and fairly scientific. And then, of course, there are infrasound monitoring equipment devices used to assess the levels of sound vibrations. But before we go back into older things, we also have ghost boxes, which I've never quite understood myself. They basically scan AM and FM frequency, and it's said to be able to pick up if the ghosts are trying to communicate. But that does seem to be a little dubious. I'm not sure how much ghosts and radio really match together. So that's one I'm a little bit doubtful on. I will say, though, that the older methods do seem to be a little more scientifically certain, because either they work or they do not, unless you are deliberately being fraudulent. So the first one that has been used for quite a long time are dowsing rods, or pendulums, where you set something up and either use it to try and track down where the haunting might be or where the ghost might be, or you set it up with some kind of a stand so that nothing can move it, and you see if the ghost can make it move itself, um, which I suppose if it can move things, then that would prove a certain amount. Another item which interestingly was originally a child's game is a Ouija board, which a great many experts in the field, including priests and such, will tell you are exceptionally dangerous. And of course, they are supposed to help you speak with the spirits. In South Africa, we don't go quite as fancy as a Ouija board, but we have a game called Glassy Glassy, which pretty much does the same thing. Um, and they are said to be very, very dangerous, so maybe they are not. It's hard to tell. We'll talk about views on those in a little bit. And then you have what they call trigger objects, bells and such things that can allow the spirit to make a noise or interact. They may also include items that may mean something to the supposed deceased, um, toys, wedding rings, and such like, um, to try to trigger the ghost. So those things absolutely are used. A very interesting idea, not sure whether that might upset them or cause them to talk. We can say that there are varying possibilities in that regard. Now, all of these items and tools are supposed to allow the goats to be found, seen, or communicate with you, along with the toys, as it were. Um, Ghost hunters may employ the assistance of psychics, mediums, clairvoyants, or other so-called sensitive individuals thought to have the ability to identify and make contact with spirits. Some have brought in demonologists, exorcists, or even clergy to say prayers, give blessings, perform rituals, possibly to cleanse the location of said thing, whatever it may or may not be. So at least experts are supposed to come in, but I know from my own experience that getting the clergy in, especially from any one of the mainline religions, will absolutely get you a hard no. They say you should not mess with such things, and it is always a last resort to go in with an exorcist. So joining a team of ghost hunters would make any such clergyman fairly dubious, in my uh, personal opinion. But depends on how you view things. Now, cold spots. Ghosts apparently cause a sudden temperature decrease, and it might be minor or it might be major. How much this is so depends. In some movies, you actually see the main characters in an area so cold that their breath can suddenly be seen. Um, how much this is so is difficult to tell. But again, I've never actually found a reasoning for this. Now, I can tell you from my own experience, I have experienced cold spots in places purported to be haunted that were not always there. And of course, you will find a great many different stories from all sorts of people that say, yes, that is exactly what happens. But still, if anybody knows, I would love to hear your opinion Um, why on earth would ghosts more cause a cold spot? I don't necessarily have an answer to that, and I would very much like one. Do they require some form of energy from the environment to appear? And that's what causes it? I'm not sure. Why orbs? Difficult to say, not too sure what an orb really is. Is it a sort of very low level form of apparition? Um, is it something that turns up because of the way a haunting might interfere with the environment? None of these things are really well answered. And to me, that makes things rather difficult, because if we're trying to get a good answer on what we are seeing and what it might be, um, we need a little bit more answer to that. But alas, even even quite a bit of research doesn't turn up too much, um, which is kind of sad. Now, one of my all-time favorite sort of genres are sort of paranormal horror type movies, and of course we know that in these stories you can see all sorts of stuff. We also can find, if we go for an even cursory look on Pinterest, ancient vampire, or purportedly ancient vampire hunting kits and more. And of course it is really, really, really cool. They are, but are they meaningful, or is it just fanciful ideas? Well, we can say that there is a lot of folklore and superstition that does go around, and a lot of fakery. Let's be fair. But we can say that the roots of ghost hunting really and truly um, goes back a long time. As long as people have believed that there can be ghosts, people have gone to try and figure out what they are and find them. There are records, even as far back as the Greeks and Romans, where there have even been groups to find out more and check out such things. So it's been part of the human experience for as long as we have believed in things that go bump in the night. So there's no doubt about that. I think that it is fair to say um, we believe in such things, and therefore we will go and poke the bear, such that we're, hey, Imke. So it's not a new thing, but in recorded history at least, uh, certainly Greeks and Romans, um, the Victorian era, where the spiritualist movements, uh, that's the framework of the modern fascination at the very least, and all of that. And of course, we then go on with the issue such as it was um, with movies and books, and of course, the real start of the fascination in modern society was certainly started by people like Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, with their famous novels that really did get a lot of interest. Um, I do know for fact that none of the ghost hunting equipment type stuff is ever used by any exorcist of the Catholic Church. The only such tools and things required for an exorcist is to get rid of anything evil. So the use of Holy Communion, the use of blessed water and holy oils and things, and the rite of exorcism. It is aimed at getting rid of, not finding out and communicating with them at all. So, from what I have heard from some friends, this is true also in the Muslim community. They're not interested in communicating and only in getting rid of if it becomes a problem situation. Now, if we look at the varying scriptures, we do know for absolute certain that it is considered to be something that you never do. You are forbidden to attempt to speak to the dead in texts as far back as the Jewish scriptures, which of course are fundamental and part of both Christian and Muslim scriptures. So right the way along, they're not denying the existence. They are simply telling you, don't touch. And this is very much a situation right the way along. But why do they tell you all of that? Why do they say to you that you should not? Now, that's another thing that isn't really explained as such. They basically will tell you straight up that the problem is it's evil, and if it's evil, you can't go and touch it, so just don't. I don't know. It's a very dissatisfactory explanation in many ways to say just it's bad, don't touch, we're not telling you anything about it. Why would this be? What is the aim? What are they trying to say in that sense? I don't really know. It seems that they are saying that you have to believe, but at the same time won't let you know anything about it, and that's very, very common. The older equipment, if you go and search around for it, pretty much will tell you straight up it's all stuff to get rid of, rather than any items for finding out more. Though interestingly, there have been some quite innovative things, such as with the earlier firearms, bullets carefully hollowed out and filled with holy water, or silver bullets for some of the more physical creatures, at least. So there is that. We can say that people have been checking it out over the centuries for a very, very long time. Whether or not you should is another item, but certainly holy objects are used, if you will, in dealing with your investigations. I think it would be fair to say that the bottom line is, as scripture would say to you, yeah, it exists, don't go there. There are injunctions in the Bible that say to you that you should not attempt to communicate with the dead. And I suppose this is based on the idea, at least, that all people that die, at least within the majority of religions, their spirits are taken back to the divine, to God in some way. And if you do encounter anything, it's not a ghost at all, but rather something else, and therefore evil, and therefore you shouldn't have anything to do with it. Hard to say. There is no real proper scientific evidence one way or another, which makes it very, very difficult. And I think we can safely say that when it comes to ghost hunting, there is no such thing as a professional per se. They are absolutely all amateurs in the sense, not that they are not skilled, but in the sense that um, they are not formally trained and educated in what they do, which means that there is no proper formal study in what is out there, at least that we know of. I mean, let's be fair, we can thank America's Area 51 to show at least the idea that there is research into, um, and there has been government research over the centuries. We know that for fact. We know that in Nazi Germany, for example, Hitler and a great many of his party were massively involved in the occult and searching for occult items. We know that in Britain, believe it or not, the Wiccan community was involved in assisting the government in, at least trying to assist the government in finding out information and more about the Germans. So, on both sides, during World War II, there was government involvement. Um, as we said, in America, Area 51 is said to have all manner of interesting things, and if you're a fan of the Indiana Jones movies, they have the Ark of the Covenant stored away in there as well. So, who knows? How serious is it? It's hard to say. The very fact, I think, that the Catholic Church to this day has formally recognized exorcists seems to imply that there is something out there that we ought to be aware of. And as I say, when I was a friar and I worked alongside an exorcist for a while in the Catholic Church, we absolutely did encounter several things which I would be very, very hard pressed to explain away by anything other than something truly weird. Um, so, on that grounds, it seems that we do indeed share our world with something more, but what it is has not been satisfactorily explained. Now, having gone through ghosts and such, I am now pressed to wonder if any of these ghost like um, equipment thingies might be of use in one of our cryptids. Now, as we have discovered with previous lives, um, jinn are a thing, and they are considered to be real. They are an entire set of people that are not human, that exist only partly on this plane of existence. They are not demons or angels or spirits. They are semi-corporeal at different times, and they turn up in a number of cultures um, under different names and things. So they are absolutely considered to be a thing. But if they are moving in any manner or form between dimensions, would that cause an electromagnetic pulse or change? Would that draw energy from the environment and cause cold spots? Um, would you be able to pick it up with thermal imagery? Um, do they make some form of gateway between as they move between the hidden and this world? It's hard to say. In terms of the more physical cryptids, um, for example, Bigfoot or Nessie, um, given that they are considered to be physical beings, I would say that trying to find them is a matter not of fancy equipment, but rather effort. And they should, being what they are, turn up quite naturally on any kind of video or photograph and should absolutely certainly be recordable by normal means if they are indeed there. Now, they do say they are incredibly rare and incredibly well hidden, but as technology and more goes along, surely we should be able to at least answer some of those questions. Um, Hard to say. It would be nice to think we could. Um, but then, as somebody pointed out to me the other day and was absolutely accurate in their point, we know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the depths of our own ocean. And I think that's true of a lot of places around the world. Um, there are depths that are too deep to go to. We know that there are actual laws that are agreed between multiple countries that disallow almost anybody to go to the North Pole anymore without very good reason. Um, why? That's not really explained. What's up there? Is there anything up there? Or is it just a lot of cold? Very, very hard to actually get a decent answer, I think. Um, it's hard to be able to say one way or another if we can actually prove any of that. Um, it would be nice to get something a little more hardcore. However, however, here is what I have found and not been able to satisfactorily prove or explain. And from my own experience, I have experienced a poltergeist which was quite violent and moved objects. How that happened could not be explained. I have absolutely seen shadow people, which may or may not be a form of jinn, and that also could not be explained. I have seen ghosts, and yes, they absolutely did cause me to feel cold, but that may arguably have just been because it was quite a shocking experience, and therefore you might say it was just because I was sufficiently terrified at the time that it made me feel cold. But then there absolutely have been times when I was not afraid but felt the cold around a haunting of some kind. So perhaps we cannot say that conclusively. I have, in my attempts to get around, once seen what may have been a cryptid. Um, Very, very hard to tell. It was very brief. And unfortunately, on none of these particular occasions was I able to get photographs or anything like that. It was never really at a time when I went out looking for them. Rather, it was one of those situations where it happened and I was doing something else at the time. So, hard to say. I think that absolutely ghosts of some form do exist, but what exactly they are and how they work is almost impossible to tell at this stage. I think that the possibility of the jinn existing is very good, but how they are and how they work is hard to say. Most other cryptids, I think, are either older animal remnants and by and large are extinct or simply made up. So I'm not a big believer in cryptids per se, but that's just me. There are plenty of very interesting stories of people who say they have seen them, some of which seem to have a lot of veracity to them. And that leaves us with the final um, question, which, and this is now where we verge on religion, because The last two categories of the paranormal or supernatural would be angels and demons. Do they exist in any manner or form? As a celestial being of some variety, um, they are not part of this world, and it's strongly a matter of whether or not you actually believe in this or that religion. In Christianity, you talk of angels and demons. In Islam, they also speak of angels and demons. In Judaism, equally so. But of course, we then have multiple other religions. Hinduism definitely speaks of things that we can say are demons, the Rakasha. So, demons, yes. I do not recall any particular mention of angels in Hinduism, so perhaps that's a point to consider. But there are plenty of other religions that speak of um, spirits from beyond that may or may not qualify as angels or demons. And if these things do exist, we assume at least they fit to their specific category, which is to say, all angels, unless they're fallen, are good, and seeing one is a wonderful thing, and they are there as a messenger from God, whatever God may or may not be, which is great. And if it is a demon, they are across the board evil, and absolutely there is nothing more you can say about them, because demons are demons are demons. Um, and if you see one, run like hell and pray like hell, because if you'll excuse the irony of that statement, you don't want to have anything to do with them. So absolutely, it is a matter of faith whether or not those do or do not exist. Now, of course, the majority of faith say that they do. But the majority of faith also don't tell you too much about what they might be. We have a lot of stories that are not considered to be canon, shall we say, that tells you of the origin of many of these things and categorizes many of these things. No point in the Bible is it mentioned how angels or demons are categorized, or what ranks or types they have, really, except in the most lightest way. We know that there are archangels, we know that there are cherubim and seraphim, but there's no real explanation for them. There's a lot of apocryphal writings that go into great detail on these things, but from a purist point of view, if you will, being Christian does not require you to believe any of that, but it does require you to believe in the existence of. And this is much the same with Islam. The canonical texts, so to speak, are very thin in what they categorize or say. They basically say it's there, and you have to accept that they are, but have nothing to do with them. Hey there, Ruth and Chips. I love your name. That is awesome. So yes, absolutely, such things are considered to be there, but nobody wants to tell you about them, which I think is very interesting. I don't know, do you have comments there on anybody? Do feel free to throw your 2 cents in and we can discuss it. But it seems that, at least to me, by and large, we are not progressing greatly in the science of paranormal investigation. I think that we need to be a little bit more hardcore and scientific in our methodology and tools and give reasons for why we say, oh, we have an EMF reader. Because there isn't enough actually told, in my opinion. But that said, it does seem that there is a general consensus around the world that ghosts definitely exist. They do come in some form of category that range from little more than an echo, which cannot interact with anybody and simply repeats itself over and over, a ghost walking down a corridor. It is nothing more than that, right the way up to the full-on, it's a poltergeist and will throw things at you and possibly attempt to murder you. So it seems that you get varying categories and strengths of ghosts, though we don't have any particular reason to say what causes the difference or why. We can, to a certain degree, see a reasonable commonality in that it seems that the more tragic or more violent the death that caused the ghost to appear gives it more strength. So it may possibly depend on how angry the ghost actually is as a result of their death. And that might give it more or less energy, so to speak. In terms of the full-on cryptids like Bigfoot and such, well, they're either there or they're not, and they don't seem to bother most people, so perhaps we don't need to be concerned at all. How true that might be, I don't know, but I personally have never been accosted by a Bigfoot, so I'm fairly happy in that regard. In terms of what we are going to, at least generally for now, and on this channel, call the jinn, are they real? It seems that they might be. Are they a problem? Well, that, at least according to what we are told, depends entirely because, like people, you get good ones and bad ones, and there are people you can trust and there are people that will mug you, and in exactly the same way there are jinn that are trustworthy and there are jinn that will attempt to do bad things to you, and there are those that simply don't give a stuff about you and will have nothing to do with you because they just don't care. It seems to be across the board, and that seems very fair, I suppose, if they are what they seem to be, at least. It's hard to tell. But yeah, there is that. So we have a number of categories appearing. Are these categories true? The only way to know that is to take this a lot further and to go in with even more stories from around the world with as many different cultures and peoples and places as we can in order to at least attempt to see if there are commonalities in people's different experiences, see if there are any reasons why it might be true to say that they are a thing. Let's at least say that. And we shall continue with all of that. Now, remember, of course, if you're enjoying these chats and you're having fun, like, send the love, share with all of your buddies so that we can get people to join in and add their opinions. The more opinions that we get and the more stories that we get and the more comments that we get, the better our exploration will be, which I think is very, very important. But as we progress, it seems that all we can say is not enough examination is done. However, We know in the Quran, you are told in as many words, boldly and straight up, no, you should not, you may not, do not, it is bad. Do not have anything to do with any kind of the supernatural. It's not your job. Your job is to worship God, and that is quite enough. God will protect you from anything if you have proper faith and you do things in the proper way. So the idea of any kind of paranormal research is absolutely not something you should do at all. In the Christian Bible, it pretty much says the same thing. Thou shalt have no other God but me. And of course, it tells you do not interfere or try to communicate with those who are dead. The Torah as well tells you exactly the same thing. You may not, you should not, do not. Your job is to worship God, and that is sufficient. Now, a point that was raised by somebody in our last live, which I thought was very, very interesting, was that these things gain power by your belief in them. Is that true? Well, I don't know. But if that is the case, that might very much be the reason why most major religions will tell you straight up, do not have anything to do with them, but then don't tell you anything about them. The less that the common man, as it were, believes, the less belief there is sloshing around, and therefore the less strength that they have, which I suppose would make sense. But then again, that is no more than a theory. I cannot in any manner or form prove any of that. So I can't tell you if that is or is not a thing. Cheers, keep the throat from getting too dry. But at the end of the day, it seems that we can say this. Whether or not angels and demons exist is a religious issue, and it is a matter for your belief and faith. And given the fact that they are of celestial origins, whether it is positive or negative, assumedly there is no way of proving one way or another of their existence. It's entirely a matter of faith, and God intends it as such because faith is what you are meant to have. So we are going to, for the most part, discount investigation, at least, into the celestial. In terms of physical cryptids, we are going to also have to discount most investigation of any fancy variety, simply because if they are there, they will ultimately and eventually be found and evidence found thereof, or it will be disproved. So perhaps we will never know. In terms of the jinn, that's an interesting one, because if they only partly exist in this world and only sometimes have a physical body, it will be very difficult to prove their existence unless one is able to actually encounter and speak with one and get it on camera, preferably in a way that proves that it is got on camera and isn't a hoax. So that would be a bit difficult, but I think that we could very much do better with ghosts, at least figuring out exactly what they are, why some become ghosts and some do not. Because if you think about it, around the world in a single day, we have, I don't know how many billion people in the world. I mean, there must be quite a few million that die every single day around the world. Um, and I mean, in the course of a year, that would add up pretty hardcore. And yet, we don't have that many hauntings, which seems to imply then that, for the most part, if you die, you do not become a ghost. You move on to wherever you are meant to move on. Either you disappear back into the universe, or go to heaven or to hell if you were not a good person, or something in that variety. However, some do become ghosts, and we need to try to figure out why some will and others won't. We've seen absolutely that a large amount of violence or tragedy might well cause a ghost, but there are plenty of people that die through violence and tragedy that do not become ghosts. Um, an extremely large amount of anger and hate can cause you to become a ghost, but there are plenty of people who have died with lots of anger and hate that did not become ghosts. So, how do we know what causes that event? And as we progress around the world in future lives, we are going to try to scrape together opinions and ideas and see if we can't, in some way, find out what the answer might be, because we absolutely do need to know. Um, but do tell me, give me your comments, send me messages, tell me what you think. Um, let's light this up and figure out more. Like, subscribe, join the channel, let's learn more. I will attempt to get as much info as I am able to get so that I can add to what we can discuss, um, and maybe try and answer some of these questions. Given as things stand, ghosts, whether they be mere echoes or full-on poltergeists, seem to be believed right around the world so far. In terms of cryptid, a sort of semi-ape humanoid type creature turns up in just about every culture around the world in one manner or form. So that definitely seems to be a thing, though they vary in what kind you get, which I suppose would make sense. Different climates get different Bigfoots, big feet, big footed. I don't know. So absolutely. Um, this seems to be occurring regardless of culture or religion. Interestingly enough, and either this says something about whether or not the cryptids exist, or about human psychology, dependent how you look at it, ghouls exist on virtually every culture and country around the world. Vampires don't, and as we discovered in our last exploration, um, the two countries that have absolutely no mythology of vampires or vampire-like creatures are both countries that have huge productions and consumptions of garlic. Make of that what you will. Um, I don't know. Very interesting point, though. Um, it seems that the only time that you get ghosts that hang around graveyards are two incidents. The first instance is when it's a very, very old graveyard from times where medicine was not that great, and there is a fair possibility that people were buried alive and hence haunt graveyards because, well, they died there. The other instance where you actually get ghosts in graveyards happens in countries where there is a strong tradition of ancestral veneration or worship, where the family that has gone on is still considered to be part of the family, and people will go to graveyards to do rituals and hold celebrations, um, and perhaps that would attract the ghosts to go to the graveyards as a meeting place to meet up with the still living family. So it seems that you only get ghosts in graveyards in those two instances. The places that you get ghosts are almost entirely not where they were buried, but rather where they died, which means roads, battlefields, and hospitals top our list in a great many ways. And those prisons that have particular places in them where they did their own executions, but there again, where they died. So those seem to give us an idea that um, where you died is more important than where you were buried, except in the case of specialized cultural ancestral veneration. Um, and indeed, I have one or two stories I've heard in South Africa where um, there were grounds where people were always buried by a particular family or clan, where for some reason the family or clan no longer lived there and moved away or died out for whatever reason, and therefore the ancestors were no longer given their due veneration, and those spaces became haunted, as if the ancestors, angry at no longer being given their just dues, uh, were now acting out. So perhaps that is a thing that needs to be considered. I don't know. Um, but we still need to find out why ghosts and what do they really want. Um, are they there because they need closure? Are they there because they're trying to get revenge? Some stories seem to indicate that, yes, revenge is exactly what they want, and some just seem sad and lost. There was an occasion where I encountered the ghost of a young girl, and it was in a place that I was very new at, and I described the entire experience to the Archbishop of the diocese the next day, and he gave me a very, very strange look and said to me, "Everything that you have said is exactly true of a young girl that died recently, um, that nobody talks about, um, and you've just explained the entire story as if you saw it." So I couldn't have known, I didn't know, but the actual story thereof um, fit exactly to what I experienced. But not long after that, I encountered the ghost again, and I said to said ghost, "Do you know that you are dead and you must go on?" And the haunting stopped, and in fact, never happened again. Apparently, it seemed that the young girl did not know that she was dead, and once she did, she moved on. But the haunting happened um, for a whole week. So, who's to say? Perhaps there is something to it. I don't know. Um, I think I may end up telling that entire story at some time. If people would like, if you would ask for it, just comment. Um, because it was a very interesting one how I had no way of knowing any of this. There was absolutely nothing that could have told me. It was in a completely new area. I was very, very new there. and nobody knew of that until I actually encountered the ghost. And the only reason that the Archbishop knew about it is because he had worked there for over 50 years, and he was dealing, because it was a recent death, he was dealing with the family, and therefore it was not something that was discussed. Death was a very sensitive thing in that area, and especially because it was a young girl, and also because there was a police investigation to find out whether or not there was any foul play, which there might have been. So absolutely, I had no way of knowing, and nobody would have talked to me about it. But I was staying with the Archbishop, and he confirmed all of it, which was very, very interesting. So who knows? But there is where we must stop for now, and in our next live, which will cover such wonderful things as the ghosts and cryptids of yet another country. We will find one and go into detail thereon. And as always, will occur at around 10 p.m. I may not do one on Sunday, but on every other day of the week, absolutely there will be one. So there will be that to look forward to, and I do hope all of you not only join me, but also will share with your friends and such like. Send it out there. Let's make a crowd. Send in comments. If you don't want to join me live, absolutely do send me comments. If you would like to join me live, you are more than welcome to when we do such things. So just remember, as long as you are respectful, we will be more than happy to have you on our channel. So absolutely, and give your opinions. If you think that ghost hunting is truly evil and should never be done, I'd like to hear your opinion and to why. And if you think it is something that should be done, equally so, I'd like your opinion, and I would like to hear why. But until then, my friends, it has been great fun. It has been very interesting. We've been chatting for an hour and a half now. So I'm going to bid you good evening and good night. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful evening and the absolute sweetest of dreams. But remember, sleep with one eye open. Keep a holy object nearby. And if something does go bump in the night, perhaps don't go and poke it. Have a wonderful time.